Welcome to the third edition of the Health, Racism, and Communication Seminar, Spring 2019. I'm Sharday Cutnell, staff at the Mary and Louise Center. We're co-sponsoring this event along with Kim's, the Center of Excellence in Maternal Child Health, and the PRC, French and Research Center. So we have three speakers here today. First is Ashley Hill. Ashley Hill is a certified location counselor and holistic doula. She's a member of the Advocacy and Outreach Coordinator for Birthmark, the Doula Collective, and Birth Justice Organization, and she's dedicated to supporting, informing, and advocating for pregnant and parenting people and their families in New Orleans. She's the founder of the Uptown Doula, which provides postpartum care to families in the greater New Orleans area through non-judgmental support, harm reduction strategies, and a focus on reproductive justice. She's a community doula for Take Care Baton Rouge, a partner for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and contributor to a New Jersey-based teen parent advocacy group. Honor Your Mamas, a parent advisor for the Aspen Institute Post-Secondary Achievement for Parents Initiative, and a member of the Maternal and Child Health Coalition. And next we have Clare Daniel. Dr. Clare Daniel is an administrative assistant professor of women's leadership at Tulane University's Newcomb College Institute, where she conducts research, teaches courses, and coordinates programming related to reproductive politics. Her book, Mediating Morality, The Politics of Teen Pregnancy in the Post-Welfare Era, was published by the University of Massachusetts Press in 2017. Her writing has also appeared in publications such as Signs, Journal of Women in Culture and Society, the edited collection MTV and Teen Pregnancy, critical essays on 16 and Pregnant, and Teen Mom. She teaches in Tulane's Department of Communication, Gender and Sexuality Studies program, and Honors program. She also coordinates Newcomb College Institute's Reproductive Rights and Reproductive Health Internship program, which places undergraduate students at community organizations in New Orleans that work on reproductive rights, health, and justice. She's a member of the New Orleans Maternal and Child Health Coalition. And last, we have Kimberly Novod. She's an educator, a doula, and a health advocate. She's the founder and executive director of Saul's Light Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting neonatal intensive care units and bereaved families in New Orleans. In 2014, Ms. Novod's son Saul passed away as a result of complications from his premature birth. His legacy is inspiration for the Saul's Light. Ms. Novod is a Louisiana certified secondary teacher and a graduate of State University of Louisiana and Troy University of Alabama. She is a member of the New Orleans Maternal and Child Health Coalition.
Right, well, I'll start. I'm Clare, and first I just want to thank you all for coming and to thank the School of Public Health for hosting us. It's great to be here, and Shakufa Ramirez for organizing this. I personally am thrilled to be in the company of my fellow panelists and also in the company of the other speakers in this really great series. So thank you for having us. What we're going to do in our presentation today is we'll start by discussing what is the Maternal and Child Health Coalition, who are we, what have we done, what are our future goals, recommendations for improved health services for birthing people in New Orleans, and the lessons that we've learned through our relatively short lifespan as a coalition so far, and then why we think communication around systemic racism and health disparities is important. So I'll start by just telling you a little bit about who we are. The coalition was founded in the summer of 2018, sort of on the heels of a report that the Mary Amelia Center put out called The Health of Women and Girls in Louisiana, Racial Disparities in Birth Outcomes, which came out in 2017. And there's a handout going around that sort of summarizes some of the conclusions of that report, but basically it talks about the statistical differences, the differences between Black women's and white women's birth outcomes in Louisiana in terms of outcomes like low birth weight, preterm birth, and infant mortality. And then we also know from reports put out by the Department of Health that there are stark racial disparities in terms of maternal morbidity and mortality as well. So sort of in response to those pieces of information, we formed as a group of researchers, birth workers, and advocates who want to create change around this issue. And we, as part of some of the efforts that we have made so far, which Kimberly will talk about in a minute, we wrote a letter which included this as sort of like the closest thing we have to a mission statement right now. So we are, oh, I have it written down here, so I don't have to turn my head. We are the New Orleans Maternal and Child Health Coalition, a group of individuals and community organizations dedicated to advocating for improved health services for women and children in New Orleans. Due to the dire statistics concerning birth outcomes, particularly for women of color in our community, we urge community members, government officials, hospital and service administrators, and healthcare providers to implement interventions to address this crisis. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, what we're all about. And we also wanted to point out that we intentionally center the experiences and recommendations of diverse women. And I'll turn it over to Kimberly to talk about some of the things that we've done so far as a coalition.
One of the first steps that we took as a coalition was to take the statistical data regarding birth outcomes in the city of New Orleans and turn it into an easy to comprehend one-pager that we then widely disseminated in the community. And what this document does, I believe you have that document there. What it does is outline not only the qualitative and quantitative data, but allows us to involve other coalition members, such as myself, to kind of put a face to the statistics, to make the story become real. So for example, I represent Saul Foundation, which is an organization I started after my son passed away. So when we see that percentage rate that talks about 9.4% of infant mortality rate in the African American community, I'm what that looks like. My son is what that looks like. And so what we found is that employing those voices and giving kind of life to those statistics, it makes for very powerful advocacy. So people can see exactly what it is that we're talking about, and that they aren't just numbers on a page, but that they know that this actually affects people's lives. And so the advocacy has given us a greater platform to engage various individuals and community organizations. As Claire mentioned, we're working with birth workers, doctors, doulas, and other community birth workers that include researchers, PhDs and and so we found that their inclusion and their involvement allows us to have a diverse group of stakeholders, and the majority of whom are women, which is an empowerment aspect that is not lost on us. It matters that we are the voices that are, kind of giving life to this work. So we're creating change for women and by women, and so that's something that's very important to us. Oh, sorry. So another thing that we've done is taken our mission on the road. So we've presented in front of City Council and spoken with individual council members to kind of create an awareness and a desire for the creation of an Office of Maternal and Child Health. And the employment of an epidemiologist, something that is a big goal of ours, so that there is somebody that is dedicated to tracking disparities and also finding solutions to address those disparities as well. So we're, continuing to participate in public forums such as this. Birthmark, which is an active coalition member, is doing yearly panels and conferences such as the Black Birth Matters, and then the Ain't I a Woman event is coming up in April, and Ashley can tell you about that. Just being able to share our message in all forms is something that we continue to do. And working with grant writers so that we can kind of leverage the support and the community partnerships that we have. And then here we have our future goals. So these are the things that we want to see happen. These, this is where we're going. And so we want to develop a core group of principles that is going to be necessary for participation in the coalition so that everybody knows the goal that we're working toward and is able to communicate that mission. We want to build capacity to work with partners in state government. So right now we're focusing in New Orleans, but we really would like to expand statewide. And we have a lot of involvement going on right now in Baton Rouge. So in fact, we're going to be a part of a health summit that's on April 2nd. And so we can give you more information about that as well. And so again, what we want to do is expand the voices within the coalition, paying particular attention to the grassroots movement, engaging families, engaging the people that experience the health disparities, so that they know that their lives matter and that everybody deserves equal access to health care.
My name is Ashley Hill. I'm a birth doula and lactation consultant after Birthmark doulas, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about some of our recommendations for improved health services for birthing people in New Orleans. So first, when we think about adverse birth experiences, we've all heard the stories. We've read multiple articles. We've heard the voices of many people who have been affected. Kimberly so graciously sat here today and was vulnerable and talked to us a little bit about what her experiences been. So we really want to move forward, and that's what brought about the Maternal Child and Health Coalition, is we want to think about solutions. What can we do to move forward and stop this from happening? And what we've learned is that many of these things that are happening, these adverse birth outcomes for mothers and children, many of them are preventable. So we really want to talk about some of the solutions. One of the things that is a recommendation of ours is to increase the presence of doulas at birth. The reason that it's so important to us to increase the presence of doulas in person, I'll talk to you a little bit about it with the next slide, is we are people who actually go into the homes of our clients and we sit with them. We learn about their backgrounds, we learn about their past histories, we sit at the table, we talk to grandma, we talk to cousins, we talk to in-laws, we talk to all of these people who are a part of this birthing experience. So we're not just sitting with them for a few minutes. Even in terms of like midwifery care, we also are pushing like a midwifery model of care. That does not mean that we want to disseminate the practice of obstetrics and gynecology, but we do want to dismantle some of the practices that are currently in place. So when we talk about a midwifery model of care, meaning that we need that compassion to be a part of it, we need it to be a partnership. That healthcare, especially the birthing process, is not a woman or a birthing person walking into the room and being told what their experience is going to look like. What it is them walking in and say, this is my past experience. This is what I look forward to having. It doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily create magic. And there are times where there are medically necessary procedures, but that birthing person needs to feel like they are empowered and have autonomy over their body during the process. So the goal is to create a midwifery model of care where we have support persons, doulas, midwives, OBs, whoever that person may be, even if it's a medically necessary cesarean. We're not in the business, I'm not in the business of telling people what to do with their bodies under any circumstance. So even if it is a medically necessary cesarean, we're not saying not to save the life of that mother, not to save the life of that child. We are saying that they need to be completely aware of what goes on and why it's happening. I've talked to countless mothers, especially mothers of disadvantaged backgrounds, of lower socioeconomic status, and mothers of color who have told me time and time again, I've supported alone probably over 50 people in birth, and in my collective, we have people who have supported as many as 90. So we supported thousands of people collectively, and resoundingly hear women of color, especially young women of color, especially from marginalized backgrounds, saying like, I had to have a cesarean, I don't really know why. Or this happened to me because I had a big baby. Or this happened, and it's just things that are not based in evidence and are not based in fact, and that is unacceptable. So we really want to move forward we're not calling people out, we're calling people in. Like, let's work together, let's fix this, let's stop it now so that we can allow people to move forward and have better birth outcomes and better birth experiences. Yes, and Kimberly already talked a little bit about the epidemiology and community coordinator. Yes. This just shows a little bit about like how doulas and midwives work together, and I want to use midwives and OBs interchangeably. So I want you to look at this because this is what we're focusing on, to provide like a midwifery model of care that That does not just have to come from a midwife. What makes a midwife is a medical professional that provides support throughout the pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum. Midwives and doulas don't do the same thing. Actually, I have one of our collective members is actually in midwifery school right now. So I had the pleasure of attending a birth with her in the realm of being a midwife. So she wasn't a doula in that birth, she was a midwife. She says, I can't do both because I'm checking on your vitals, I'm checking on all of these medical steps and making sure that everything is clear. So I can't necessarily be the person to hold space for you in that way emotionally. Yes, I'm going to have a warm candor. Of course, I'm going to ask for consent. These are basic things. These are standard. That shouldn't be a good provider. That should be the standard of care that you will receive. That it is consent driven. It is trauma informed with whomever your provider is. We shouldn't have to do this picking and choosing of what kind of care I'm going to get with what provider. You should know that you're going to get that no matter who you see. So yeah, so that's where we fuse midwives and doulas together. That we're both professionals that work together, making sure that you and your family are fully supported during this transition. Some other recommendations for improved health services for birthing people in New Orleans. We want to talk about addressing barriers to accessing care, including reliable transportation, family-friendly providers, etc. And we'll talk to you a little bit in the next slide talking about social determinants of health and how this impacts people in their health care and their birthing experience particularly. Implementing the Department of Child and Maternal Health epidemiologists, we have to hold facilities and providers accountable. I'm held accountable on my job. So I think everyone should be held accountable to make sure that we are receiving the standard of care and that you're not having to pick and choose once again on who's going to provide which type of care. Also ensuring cultural competence is permeated throughout all care giving. So addressing disparities in representation within obstetrics and gynecology and midwifery. Also implicit bias training. When we're talking about the disparities in representation with obstetrics and gynecology, meaning there is a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people who are accepted into medical school based on in comparison to their white counterparts, and also access to midwifery care. For example, I have, like I said, I have a person that is in our collective right now who's in midwifery care. So I'm just using this example, who's in midwifery school. She's traveling to Maine to go to midwifery school, back and forth. She has kids here. So she's doing work, she's doing that. She is a white woman. I would not be able to, and not just because of my race, but because of my financial ability, my financial capacity, to be able to go back and forth. So being able to have accessible midwifery programs. Yes, there are some programs where you can do certain things online, but in order to be able to have your preceptorship and be able to work with someone hands on here, I've also talked to several women of color who have attempted to complete midwifery practices and have had difficulty finding someone to bring them on to do it to be their understudy. So just thinking about ways to find accessible routes into midwifery care and also obstetrics and gynecology for persons of color. And when we talk about an implicit bias training, this is a step. This isn't it. It's not like you take an implicit bias training and then you're free from implicit bias, right? You take a training to bring awareness. And you take a training as the first step. And that's something that we are insisting and we are recommending that is also a part of not only obstetrics and gynecology care, but as a part of the curriculum in medical school. So the University of Michigan is doing some work to create a reproductive justice-based curriculum for their medical students. That's something that needs to be a part of actually your training, not something that you think of as an afterthought. So talking about the social determinants of health, here's a great, because I would of course forget to name one, of course, but when we talk about income and jobs, isolation. When we talk about isolation, meaning that there are many birthing people who go to the hospital alone, who don't have a support person, who don't have anyone to be there with them, and they're birthing alone. So we want to make sure, especially with your doula care, even if not doula care, this affects all of us. When I have these conversations, when we're having these conversations about equity and best practices for birth and reproduction, it doesn't only affect you if you're family planning. It doesn't only affect you if you have a child already. It doesn't only affect you if you're planning to get pregnant or something. It affects you if you know a person who has been pregnant. It affects you if you have been born. It affects you. So this is a human rights issue that we're dealing with. It's not. It intersects with public health. It intersects with so many different things. But it's all of our responsibility to really carry the torch, have these conversations. I want us having these conversations when we're in the hair salons. I want us having these conversations when we're out having drinks with our friends. I want us having these conversations when we're at church. I want us having these conversations wherever we are because they're important. And if we don't normalize these conversations instead of saying, oh, I don't really want to talk about this because we have to start naming things and putting it on the table and having those conversations, and that's the only way we're going to be able to make any progress moving forward. When thinking about hunger, I work with several pregnant people where we're not always doing just, we're not even able to get to, let's talk about doing a birth plan, or let's even talk about what your birth vision is. It's like, I'll be right back. Let me go to the store and get you like some fruit because that makes you healthy. Or let me go to the store and get you a sandwich because you haven't had nothing to eat. We're also doing some work, which I can talk about later, surrounding persons who are incarcerated and trying to push for them to get one extra meal, like while they are pregnant, because we can talk later about kind of like the disproportionate like health outcomes and how many of those people are also incarcerated that contribute to those numbers. Talking about housing, and we talk about like increased stress levels. If you're homeless or if you're being evicted or if you don't have secure housing, then how are your stress levels not going to be high? There's no yoga, there's no meditation that I can do if I don't have food, if I don't have housing, and if I don't have access to mental health resources, transportation. When we talk about adverse social determinants of health, what is perceived in the way that this conversation has been had so many times, and what I hear the framing surrounding this, is that persons who are birthing or pregnant persons, they're not doing something, or they've done something wrong, or they're not being compliant, right? Or they don't attend their doctor's appointments. We actually consulted a hospital in Louisiana, in North Louisiana, and asked what were some things that we could do working as a community doula to assist them and to help some of their clients. And they're like, they don't come to their doctor's appointments. Well, guess what? They live 30 minutes away and don't have transportation. They don't live on a bus line. They don't have secure housing. So maybe the place where their children were once dropped off last week, that has changed this week. So they have to like garner like support from other people in the community, from family members, and ask them, can you bring my child to school? I can only get a ride to one place that day. I'm not able to make it to the doctor's appointment. When we talk about birth violence, and that's something that Birthmark works towards, there's something that in the Maternal Child and Health Coalition we're working towards to dismantle. There should not be violence in birth. People should not be traumatized or re-traumatized. If we already know that 1 in 3 women has experienced some type of sexual trauma in their lifetime, or sexual abuse in their lifetime, then we can automatically assume that 1 in 3 people who birth have experienced those same have experienced those same things. So in moving forward, there is no way that we can approach birthing without using a trauma-informed model, which should be consent-driven.
Okay, so now that you know a lot about what we are all about as a coalition, we thought we would talk a little bit about sort of some of the lessons that we've learned in our operating and communicating as a coalition, both internally and externally. So I'll start with the internal stuff, because just kind of like getting a coalition formed and started and running is, I think, well, for me personally, was a new experience, and I think there were many members of the coalition who have a lot of experience doing this with other coalitions that they're in, but some of the things that I know I learned, and I think many of us learned through this process, included things like being flexible about where we met and what time we met as a coalition. So we started out by meeting in the building where my office is, which is on the Uptown campus at Tulane, which wasn't an accessible location for some of our members, and is also really tricky in terms of parking. And so we eventually learned that we needed to switch up the location and have other members of the coalition host in other parts of town, which allowed different people to be able to come to different meetings. So that then also presents a challenge, because we have I meant to say this earlier, but our first meeting we had 11 people at, and now we have our membership list is at least 55 people long, right? So we never have a meeting where we have all 55 people. Rather, we often have a completely different set of people at each meeting. And so we also learned that we needed to have really thorough notes that were accessible to everyone, so that the people, because we had a different set of people at each meeting, we needed everyone to be on the same page about what we talked about, and to be able to the notes as we have them right now are also editable by everyone, so that people can, if they have a comment and they weren't able to go to the meetings, they can comment on the things that we talked about. We also learned that we have to have open lines of communication with the people who are working on this at the state level, because we sort of set our agenda early on as being to operate at the level of New Orleans, and our first efforts were focused on the city council and the city budget, right, and getting that epidemiologist incorporated into the city budget, which we think we succeeded on, but we're still trying to get more information about who that epidemiologist is and what they will be doing. But anyway, so as we were focusing on the city, it took us a little bit to get all of the state actors kind of involved in our conversations, so that we really knew what was happening already at the state level, and that could then inform the work that we were doing and the things that we were advocating for at the city level. So that was another lesson that we learned. And then a big one that I think is the case for all people trying to truly have a coalition that is non-hierarchical and that includes a diverse array of voices of stakeholders from across different sectors of the community, is that we need to kind of constantly be working on the power dynamics of the internal communication that we do, because we need to make sure there are people who come to the table who are very comfortable with taking on a leadership role, and there are people who are less comfortable with that, and so being cognizant of that and trying to make sure that everybody's voices are being heard and that assumptions are being checked, because again, people are all coming from different perspectives, and so if we have people working in city or state government, and people who are doulas and moms and students, right? We have all these different people. They are all bringing different assumptions to the table, and so it's a matter of trying to make sure that everyone is keeping the larger goal in mind, but without sort of bulldozing over other people, right? And then the other thing that sort of relates to this question of making sure we knew what was already happening at the state level, which is a lot, right, around these issues, is that we sort of also have, early on, we were trying to figure out, are we a group of outsiders, like people outside the government structures, putting pressure on those structures? Or are we a group of people that is made up of all the people who are working on this, including those who are doing that work within those structures, those governmental structures? And ultimately, we are that mixed group. That's what we ended up being. And I think it's worked out well, because it's important for us to have all the information about what's already happening, so that we can advocate for things that complement those things, right? So, like, for instance, when we were getting ready to ask the city to hire an epidemiologist and a community care worker coordinator, it was important for us to meet with the director of the health department and the director of Healthy Start, right, to figure out what is actually already happening at the city level that we can use our efforts to augment and to complement, as opposed to this sort of more adversarial potential position we can put ourselves in. So, and then in terms of external communication, some lessons that we learned. One is that, and both of you should chime in at any point, because I think some of this is stuff that we talked about together. But one is that we realized when we did the city council presentation, the council members that our presentation resonated with were the ones who had a personal experience that they could relate to around these issues. And so what we realized is that the challenge for us is to make it clear to everyone in the same way that Ashley was just talking about, that this is something that can and should resonate personally with everyone, right? So how do we communicate it in a way that actually connects with as many people as possible?
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little bit. I think I've heard stories, especially like being in community with Kimberly and so many people who have given birth with desirable and adverse outcomes. I think looking at a way to see like how does this connect to me? Like I feel passionate about it. I hear you. I understand what you're saying. It all makes sense. It sounds good. But I don't really have a connection to this, is what some people feel. I think start having conversations with your parents about your birth story. Start looking at your ancestral lineage. I did a training one time and we all left out in tears, right? But I didn't start thinking about until recently that my grandmother had lost a child, right? And I knew it because every time we visited her at the cemetery, there would be this headstone that said Baby Hill, right? And it was just like Baby Hill, like no one like really thought about it. We didn't have a conversation about it. I never knew what happened. But this is something that I've seen ever since I've been going to the cemetery, which my grandfather was there, so I've been going since I was a little girl. So it's now, I still don't know what happened. I'm in that place. But I'm in this place now of starting to have conversations with people in my family, just saying, what happened to Baby Hill? Like, what's that story? What's that like? And starting to like listen and say, okay, my grandmother is saying these things. Maybe this was, and then looking further into some stories is that her mother died while giving birth to her. And I always knew that she was a super affectionate person. I always knew she didn't really like touch. I always knew those things. But we just figured that's just her, right? That's what we say, that's just her. But I never, until I think actually like submerging myself into this work, and even I've been doing this work for a decade now, I still never really made the connection until recently. We're like, hold on, like there's a story in my immediate family, and I don't really know exactly what happened, but maybe something big. Or having a conversation with my mother about the 3 cesareans that she had because she had a small pelvis, which we know is not a thing, right? Right. So just having, so maybe you don't have an experience like yourself where you have experienced something individually. Talk to your family. Ask your mother about it. Ask your parent about what happened the day you were born. What was that day like for you? See if you can go back as far as possible. Some of us can go back a little bit further than others. But see what that's like and ask those stories and find out what happened, not just like to someone that you know or to someone that you're watching on TV, but in your own backyard. And I think that's important for us to make.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate, and something Ashley says all the time, and we all kind of chuckle because she's right. If you've been born, this issue affects you, right? And so we're talking about issues that affects families. If you come from a family, or you have a family, or you want a family, these are issues that affect you and will affect you at some point, right? And so I think, one thing that our coalition is doing is bringing those conversations and those communications that we have, whether it's with our families or with our girlfriends, is bringing those conversations to the forefront. Because, maternal and child health is kind of having, it's in the spotlight right now, but it actually needs to be something that is in the spotlight now, but continues to stay in the spotlight because it is going to affect us all at some point, right? So if you've been born, if you have a mother, for example, if you are a child, these are things that matter, and so we can't just let it be like a falling star, one thing that rises one moment and then the next moment we're on to the next thing. It's unfortunate, but even in 2019, things are not getting better. Preterm birth rate, infant mortality, these are things that have affected communities of colors, disparately for 30 or 40 years. We are still in that same place in 2019 when we're at the height of technology and innovation. Why is that? So we need to have continued conversation and continued communication on these issues.
Another sort of lesson that we learned from the city council presentation that we did was that we need to create more literal visibility around what we're doing. So we had the kind of unfortunate situation of having our presentation be scheduled on the same day as the breast cancer awareness presentation to the city council, which could have been a complimentary thing, but I think we came away with the impression that it was disadvantageous for us because they were so coordinated and so big and so pink and had decorated the room, you know, and
NOPD officers like all wearing pink banners, which like we agree that we think that presentation probably just should have had like their own platform because it's such an important matter that I think it's hard to hear back to that.
Right, and I think also they don't normally have two similar types of issues being presented to them in these special presentations before their actual meeting, and so it was also just like a really heavy thing to have both of those presentations on the same day, and also we were after them and they went really long. So, but that's not a lesson for us. So, anyway, the lesson for us is that we need to coordinate our visibility better, right? So like we did bring people with us to be there and support, but we weren't all wearing the same color, for instance, and we could have maybe drummed up more people, and we could have maybe had med students with their lab coats on come and sit in support of what we were doing. So we kind of learned that we can be more strategic in terms of the visibility aspect of our communication strategy. And then we really just have lots and lots more to learn. So I think like I personally am constantly learning more and more about this as we develop as a coalition, and we know that we still have missing voices, like we haven't gotten everybody that we should have involved, and and also that there's so much work already being done on this that we need to we need to support that work as opposed to reinventing the wheel, and so that's sort of a constant thing that we're working on. And to look to what's happening in other cities, other states, and even other countries on this issue, that we can sort of take those ideas and promote them here is another thing. And then I think we have one more set of points we want to make, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah, so we want to talk about like why is effective communication about systemic racism and health disparities important. So one, we want to talk about like supporting voices that are not being listened to but should. When we say about supporting voices that are not being listened to but should, is one, we want to think about like just women as outliers in general, and specifically Black women. So there is still a perception that Black women do not feel as much as non-Black women. So what happens, what that looks like in real time, it's documented, like it happens, it continues to happen, is that you report like an uncomfortable sensation or like a headache or feeling like overwhelmingly hot, right? And then someone like says, oh well, like that's normal, and they'll dismiss you for whatever reason. Or let me give you like a Tylenol or an Aleve or something like that. And this is in the hospital, this happens, right? And then we find out that person is even having an aneurysm, or their blood pressure is too high, or they're hemorrhaging. And these are things that could be prevented if they were just listened to. And I always say, no one knows your body better than you. There's not one person with any degree, with any qualifications that knows your body better than you do. Because how long have you had your body? A little bit longer than they've known about it, right? So I always say, I use this kind of superficial example, but I know that I can go to the hair salon and have something, someone will use a product that may work for everybody on my hair, but it does not work on my hair. So I know when I go there, don't use it in my hair. Like that's not gonna work. It's not gonna have the desired outcome. It's not going to take. It's not going to give. So please don't use that on my hair because I know it's not going to work. And they're like, but this is an amazing product and it came out and, you know, it costs $1,000, you know, and all of these different things. So I know it's really going to, I'm like, no, like, I've tried that 6 times. It didn't work. Like, I know it doesn't. So we want to have that same buy-in with our healthcare. When we know that something doesn't work or something doesn't sound right, or if we're feeling something different, or we're using like our intuition, we want to go through some steps. So one, we want to think about like, what are the benefits, right, of what I'm being told? What are the benefits? Because we have to be bought in. We don't just want to go in. When we walk into the salon, we don't just walk in and say, do whatever you want. Well, sometimes we can, but like, let me make that example. But sometimes we don't always go in if it's a new place and say, just do whatever you want, right? I'm here, I'm a professor, but not what healthcare should look like. We want to think about what the benefits are, so what's being said. We want to think about what the risks are of what's being said. Are there any alternatives if there's something that I don't feel comfortable with or something I'm not familiar with? Let's have those questions. What does my intuition tell me? That's probably the most important thing. What does your intuition tell you? And I think sometimes, because of the world we live in and we're downloading information at such a rapid pace, that we kind of lose that intuition a little bit. Like we push that aside and say, but I did read this thing that seemed like this was more credible than what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling right now. Nothing is going to be more credible than you and your own intuition. So use that, lead with that. It's important to listen to that inner voice inside. And then also, what if I do nothing right now? What if I just sit and what if I just wait and take some time, think about it, process it, if it's not an emergency situation? So knowing that you have options and can choose, and I don't just mean during the birthing room, I'm talking about anyone who's ever like walked into a doctor's office, anyone who's ever walked into a beauty salon, anyone who's ever walked into a situation where there may have been like a disadvantage of power dynamic. Think about those things. Do I have to react immediately? Can I take some time to think about it? We also want to lead with honesty and transparency, naming the problem and holding people accountable. So, I can speak from personal experience. We have, with Birthmark, we created something about 6 years ago called the Birthmark toolkit. And what it does is it tells people how to make formal reports, and if they've experienced some sort of birth violence, how they can like move forward in those things and what steps to take, what reports, how to write a letter, like all of these different things. We've been silently giving this to our clients for a really long time because we didn't really want to ruffle any feathers. We've never come out with a list of providers who do this or who do that, right? We've had those experiences, we've been in the room, we just never felt comfortable doing this. We didn't want to ruffle any feathers, we didn't want to like, sometimes at one point it was really difficult for doulas to get in the room. We're hired by our clients, and some providers didn't all. We have some providers who are like allies and call us and like I have a client that needs to work with you. So we do have that, but it's taken a really long time to get there, and we still don't have bodies at everything, right? We had some people who really felt that like we were coming there to do harm, or that we were coming there to have a birthing person to go against the wishes of their provider, which is never what we're doing. We want to just create like a bubble where we're like knowing that we're all a support team. I'm not there to tell them what to do. I'm not there to tell you what to do because you have your job. We all have our roles. So when I say naming things and holding people accountable, that makes us really uncomfortable, right? Having some of those conversations. It is. It does. It makes us uncomfortable. When we're talking about birth violence, when we're talking about things that go on at home, if we're having like a conflict with the person at work, it's hard to have those conversations, but it's necessary and nothing is going to change. So I look at it almost with regards to if there's an emergency where they teach you in CPR, you call 911. As opposed to you say somebody call 911 and then 911 never gets called. Like you need to call people in and let them know, hey, this did not work well. This did not go well. This was harmful. So then at least they're able to reflect because we all have our egos, right? So maybe I'm talking about you, but if I make this blanket statement, you're like, it couldn't possibly be talking about me, right? And we want to convey it, once again, that it's a human rights issue and a matter of life and death. I'm willing to have a hard conversation if it means that someone's life is going to be saved. And then also defining how and why these disparities exist, structural problems rather than individual blame. We talked about that a little bit earlier, how it's not that the persons who are going in are just not attending their appointments or they're just not invested in care. I was doing some shopping a couple weeks ago and walked into a store. People come up, they talk to you from New Orleans, you know whether you want them to talk to you or not, they talk to you born and raised. And she told me this was the owner of a boutique, and she shared with me that she had 7 children. She asked me what I did. I said I was a doula. She knew what it was. She read an article that came out recently in the USA Today, actually called Deadly Deliveries, talking about the disparities in healthcare and how many of these things are preventable. And this is a woman maybe like in her 70s, about in her 70s. She looked good. I think she was in her 70s. And she said that she delivered 7 children in New Orleans, and the last child, she almost died during labor, and that child is, I think, 30 years old, and she has not been back to the doctor since. So for 30 years, because she had that experience, because it was triggering for her to seek care, because she didn't know why these things happened, because it had not been explained to her, she created just like this overarching just like fear of like the healthcare system, and has not sought any type of medical care in 30 years. This is an affluent white woman. So can you imagine for people who are more disadvantaged, who don't have that voice, who don't always feel empowered to speak, who don't have family to stand up beside them or to support them, or who are told like you don't know what you're talking about, or who are having birth control forced on them before they can even like get out of the hospital. So all of these different things are coming at you, or who are immediately perceived as doing drugs, who are perceived as like not being in a supportive relationship, or getting pregnant on by accident, that it's not possible for a young woman of color to plan a pregnancy. So just thinking about all those things and how we have to dismantle some of those power structures. So we're talking about some disparities in care. These are a couple slides from the article, the USA Today article that I mentioned. I advise you to read it. Type in USA Today, maternal mortality, daily deliveries, whatever, like it'll come up really quickly. It's been all the buzz. So talking about disparities in care, how there are 2 women that die in childbirth almost every day in America. It's about 700 a year. And it estimates that half of the deaths could be prevented if hospitals were taking the safety measures, the proper safety measures. 2 of the leading causes of maternal death in childbirth are hemorrhage and hypertension. 90% of the deaths with hemorrhage, with hospitals taking increased safety measures, could be prevented, and 60% of deaths could be prevented with hypertension. Thank you. So we know.
Oh, so thank you. I also put my email address up there. If you're interested in learning more about the coalition or becoming involved, you can email me. I'm sort of the keeper of the documents and the list, so even though it is publicly editable, editable. So, what questions do you all have? Covered a lot of ground.
Are y'all working with any Hispanic populations, or do you know of any kind of data in New Orleans on the fact of this? Imagine talking about people are both in similar way in New Orleans. And I know that the health department has had little or no statistics about
That's the problem. Yeah, that's what we found with our coalition. We were asking those same questions and the statistics because we know the people are there. So where are the statistics? And that's really why we are saying that we need an epidemiologist, a person who is dedicated to tracking these things and addressing these things, because we're at a point where we can no longer allow this to be swept under the rug.
Yeah, so what we think has happened, at least in part as a result of our advocacy efforts, is that there will be an epidemiologist that is jointly employed by the state and the city that will be tracking this data, but we haven't actually gotten the details on, or even really a firm confirmation on the existence of that person yet. But ideally, that person would be tracking data, and we would then have more data on that.
So in asking for an epidemiologist, is that something you see, like what's the structure within other similar breakout offices?
Well, we did look at comparing what's happening in New Orleans to some other cities, and I think there might be some data on that, or some information on that on the back side of the one-pager that we handed out. But we see that cities that are really working on this have a maternal and child health division within the city government itself. And so my understanding is that New Orleans used to have one prior to Katrina, and that it actually had clinics and provided services, whereas that wouldn't be the case necessarily with what we were advocating for was a recreation of a maternal and child health division at the city level, but not necessarily for direct provision of healthcare, but for tracking the data and coordinating the resources that exist already. Does that answer your question?
So from the outside, yes, but do they have like epidemiologists in other departments? I'm just speaking from what I've seen in researching from and working with the health department. Is like their information is not always consistent. It's not. I don't know who's gathering it, but it varies year to year at the same exact information sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about. We do have members of our coalition who are like Mary Alexander, the director of the Healthy Start program, is a member of our coalition, and so she has a lot more of that information in terms of like what already exists. But I think that my guess is that this person would probably be doing more than just maternal and child health research, which in some ways is a little bit of a bummer because what we were advocating for was a devoted person, you know. But I don't even know. So don't quote me.
It's kind of hard to know. But, yeah.
We're theoretically being briefed on it in our next coalition meeting, so hopefully we'll know more soon.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to ask you, in your experience as a doula, what would you say is like the number one kind of glaring issue that you see in terms of the interaction between birthing persons and providers, specifically those that are born? Like, I've heard that just from people I know who give birth back in or Uptown, like one of their main complaints is they didn't see a doctor until like the last minute, that they had no communication. I just want to know if you have like an overarching issue that you see that's very common.
Yeah, and I'm hearing like two parts of your question. So big one, I know like with UMC, University Medical Center, while they may deliver at 2-year-old, they don't deliver to our, they deliver at 2-year-old. Those parents do, and I work with like some parents who do. They do not. It's a teaching hospital, and they work with residents, so they do not have a consistent provider, nor do they know exactly like who's going to deliver their baby. I think that is a terrible model. Like I think you should have like at least be able to build that relationship. And no one likes it. Like from the parents that I've supported, like no one likes that unknown with such an intimate process. However, I think you should go directly to and Medicaid like covers like working with the provider. So I think kind of just like being granted like access and kind of like knowing your options where you can reach out to even midwifery care is covered under Medicaid at Ashford Baptist, like in their birthing center. So like knowing or just having someone to bounce that off of or have those conversations. That's why we want us all to have these conversations. Like if you go to this particular hospital, this is what their protocol is. And while they may deliver your child at this hospital, you're not receiving care here. But you can reach out to the provider directly through recommendations, someone you know, etc. And as long as you get your insurance, and you can see that. And then something I would say that I guess is kind of like a glaring issue, inductions, like, I guess like non-medically necessary inductions. Sometimes inductions are scheduled before my business is scheduled. And what happens is when you introduce like one medical intervention, then sometimes that creates like wait for there to be another intervention, and then like that's kind of like what puts you on the path to like a non-medically necessary cesarean, because what your body is going to do is it's going to mimic the stress. And then when you see like the stress on the monitor, or when that's what's seen on the monitor, then people start reacting in a haste and like, become panicked. When it's actually like how about we could also like instead of reacting that way, let's maybe scale back on some of these interventions.
I would add to, and on the same note, is birthing people being told what's going to happen to them. So instead of having their voices be a part of the process, just like, here's what we're doing, I'm the expert. So, yeah, it's true that those hospital workers may have gone to medical school, but as Ashley said, the birthing person is the person with the most knowledge and experience of their own body, and they deserve to have an active voice in the conversation when it comes to procedures and, how things are going to go.
And I think also we're seeing like concrete responses to things, because I've heard a bunch of times, or even like, at this, we had these conversations with clients where they want to know something and they ask a question, or why is this happening, which you always have the right to ask, and someone will say, well, that's the doctor's order. That's not a reason. Right? Like, that's like, those were your orders, and you were told, but I want to know why do I need to be induced? Why am I having like a cesarean? Like, I want a reason, like a concrete answer, and I feel like sometimes like a lot of people don't necessarily receive those answers when they ask questions.
I would add to that women are less likely to be advocates for themselves just by being women. And then you give them the stress of labor and the hormones and the pain and the everything that's happening, or you are even less likely to be an advocate, and you're just going to do whatever someone tells you because you just want it to be over and you and your baby be safe. And I think that trying to educate women on being better advocates for themselves outside of the birthing process prepares them to be better advocates for themselves in the main sort of healthcare situation.
I completely agree. I cannot teach anything like wow, like.
I think we may have found our newest coalition member.
And it's a very vulnerable, you're in a very vulnerable state when you're laboring because of not just the stress, but like the change on, the changes in your body, like the pain variations, like all of those things.
You are literally opening up to the world.
Exactly. And what happens is, because you're in a vulnerable state, sometimes when people say something or if they ask you, it's like fear tactics and like coercion, like that happens in the birthing room, and it should not. So what happens is if I tell you, I've heard, I'm not making this up, I've heard if you don't do this, your baby's going to die. If you don't do this, you're going, you're not making the best decision for your baby, even if you're asking for time. So those types of fear tactics to be used to get people to do what you want them to do, that should not happen to anyone.
It's really been interesting to me sort of the response to USA Today article in different circles that I participate in. So with my CLC pad and in that world and in my public health world, and then in sort of my white mama's world, owning that that's part of my experience too. And unfortunately, I have heard a lot of comments of people saying, well, I had a great experience at Turo, or not even necessarily, but it was great, we didn't have any problems. And I guess for me personally, as a professional, but then also in terms of coalition building, I'm curious your advice on what is the conversation when that's the type of comment that you're getting, and holding space for people who have had loss and trauma, and at the same time saying, well, yeah, that is your story, but I don't know, it just feels to me sort of like it's taking away from other people, but at the same time, that is good that they had a positive, what was positive about it? So I find myself really sort of push-pulling against that, and I'm just sort of curious about your thoughts on that.
And I kind of want to go back to our slide where we talked
Because,
about
and
that.
I ask because I think it's important for everyone, like you said, to be part of the conversation, not just people who have a history or personal experience with something negative, even though an astounding number of us do. Maybe you don't have any of that familial or personal history, but still you should be at the table.
And I think the same thing, and even I want to like just give a brief example, like with you being with the CLC as well. I know I talk to parents all the time, and sometimes like in the CLC world, you'll get like referred from like friends of people, so you end up working with like groups of friends or groups of family members. I'm sure you have as well, because it happens all the time. But I've worked with people where they're like, I'm just having such a hard time, but my friend isn't like, you know, like she's having just such an easy experience with nursing, and like I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, and then I'm like, oh, I can't say it, but I'm like, I was at your friend's house last weekend. That's how that's all, you know. So it's like, people completely forgetting or like not wanting to be vulnerable or not wanting to be, you know, open with people and sharing those things. Also, we know that with the disparities in birth, and I'm going to address specifically how to answer that question because I've had to answer that question since the article has come out with several clients, but the numbers are disproportionately Black women, right? So when we say that, this is not even related to like their level of education or social economic status. Serena Williams, Beyonce, like it happened to them, and they can buy the best care possible. So it's like if it can happen to them, like this is a human rights issue, and it is rooted in racism, is what's happening. So people are not being treated, or they're not being perceived as having these experiences. So speaking to what you said, I'm going to give you a blunt answer, and then I'm going to give you like a conservative answer. The blunt answer is, as a white woman, as an uptown white woman, I don't really expect you to ever understand the experience of a Black woman. Whether she is poor or whether she is affluent, you're not going to ever understand the Black experience. And because the Black experience is different with each person, there is not like this overarching, like this is the Black experience for me. What I can do is have open conversations and check myself. And that's where it's like checking your own body. So it's like, this is my experience, but it's like, I'm also like a white woman. I'm also, a white woman. I also maybe have a male partner. All of these things. I also may be married. Like, I also may have health care. I also may have transportation and access. I also may have a sitter for my other children when I come to the doctor. So we're building like all of these layers like of privilege, which can like affect your experience. Sometimes people are treated differently. Well, you didn't come to your last 2 appointments, so I'm kind of going to have an attitude with you when you get there, right? But maybe I didn't come because my other kids, I can't bring them to the doctor's appointments, and I didn't have anyone to watch them. Maybe I didn't come because I didn't have transportation or my car broke down that day. Or maybe I didn't, for all of these reasons, it doesn't mean that I'm not investing in my health care, about my health care. So I think just kind of like checking that. And some people, I think you can only have a conversation. You can't truly like make. Yeah, I really wish we could. But I think just continue having those conversations, continue to like name the problem and hold people accountable and calling people in and saying like, hey, like I disagree with you. Like this is the experience. Some people have lives that look different than you. Some people have experiences that look different from you. That doesn't mean that I want white women to have traumatic birth experiences. Some of them are. Like if you look at the data, like it's not just like women in general, like you said, like a lot of times like are not listened to and are disempowered like when you walk into the room. So when you add also being black, also being poor to that, like that just kind of like what like I said, just kind of like build like those power dynamics. So I say just continue to have those conversations, continue to stand your ground, and you're probably the best person to have those conversations in your circle.
Just to add on to what she said, I would also just tell you that like, white people say that kind of stuff all the time. But, well, I thought that police officer was really nice. And I'm like, well, I didn't because I'm Black and they treated me differently. And I think if your friends are the ones who are saying that are white, you can say, well, that's a very like privileged perspective to just assume that everyone has had. Like I would just be super blunt and just be like, that's a very like narrow perspective to assume that Torah was going to treat you the same as we would treat like poor Black teen mother. Like that is just, maybe you might have to go back to like race 101, I don't know. But you know what I'm saying? No, really. But
like things like that, when I have these kinds of conversations, amount can. Yeah. It, yeah. Because sometimes they'll just shut down if you get too blunt. I'm like, depends on who you're talking to. But I appreciate that.
Are there any more questions?
This is more questions about the MCH coalition in general. Is it, does your review encompass other maternal child coalitions besides just this birth experience and the early super early childhood?
I think as of now, no. Would you agree?
I mean,
Yeah, right now we're really focused.
Postpartum doulas in the coalition?
What's that?
You don't have any postpartum doulas in the coalition?
Yeah, so, the way, so I work as a postpartum doula, but we do like full spectrum doula work. We have to like include postpartum like as a part like of our care because what was happening is like just needs were not being met. So like, I think like most of the doulas that are in the coalition also do postpartum.
Yeah, I think there's like the potential for us to broaden our scope at some point, but for now, we've really focused in on the issues of the birth outcomes kind of broadly defined. So, yeah, so it does extend a little bit into childhood, early childhood. But I mean, ideally, we're coming from a reproductive justice lens, that looks at these social determinants of health and incorporates support for policies that address them too, right? But I think our main focus is on really directly this set of issues.
Right, and we do recognize that it's a continuum, and so just like you were saying, reproductive justice is like, at the beginning of the maternal child health work, so.
Any more questions?